Spacebar?
That'll pause it a minute so
No, wait, get it back. Okay, if you have your Bible, open it up to Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1, Old Testament. Who's got it? You, Caitlin. Read verses 1 and 2, please.
During the third year of King
Wait again.
reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King of Judah and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. And Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God.
Okay, so basically, the king of Judah can look at as good king. King of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, bad, evil. So the king of Judah, this is a tribe, settled in a region south of Jerusalem, and it is one of the most powerful and important tribes. We're going to have David and Solomon and the Messiah is going to come from this. And so now it's in part of the nation of Israel. Babylon has a reputation for defiance. It is a big one in the Bible. They reject the one true God. They have many gods. And it is now present-day Iraq. So what's interesting in that verse is that the Lord handed Judah to Nebuchadnezzar. It's not. So this was the prophecy. So basically, horrible things happening for Judah, but God allowed it to happen because it is for His will to be done. Who else? Bible verse 3 through 6. Correct.
The king ordered Dispenza, his chief, what did I say? Eunuch, to bring some of the Israelites from the royal family and from the nobility, young men without any physical defect, good-looking, suitable for instruction in all wisdom, knowledgeable, perceptive, and capable of serving in the king's palace. He was to teach them the Chaldean language and literature. The king assigned them daily provisions from the royal food and from the wine that he drank. They were to be trained for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to attend the king. Among them from the Judaites were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief, what did I say again? Eunuch gave them names. He gave. Oh wait, I got you.
No, keep going. Last verse.
He gave the name Belshazzar to Daniel, Shadrach to Hananiah, Meshach to Mishael. What? Mishael. Oh, that's how you say it. And Abednego to Azariah.
Okay, so basically the king Nebuchadnezzar goes into this country and he takes 50 to 75 young men, and these are young men like ages 14 to 17. But he's looking for young men who are handsome, smart, healthy, not just any old boy. He wants the cream of the crop. A lot of them that he took were even of noble blood, like Daniel. So Daniel was probably royalty.
One of the other things they're looking for is somebody that wouldn't fight back, because if they were too smart, they would be executed on the spot.
They took over everything. And they did it many times. They went into Judah. So the purpose of him taking these people is to train them, to kind of brainwash them into becoming good Babylonians. So the king, they give them, they're teaching them their language, they're educating them in their ways, and then the king is giving them the same kind of food and drink that he would be eating. And he also gave them new names. So basically, by brainwashing, he's kind of wiping away everything from their past so that they're no longer who they once were, people of Judah, and now he's trying to make them his servants that would serve him and their country. So Daniel meant God is my judge, and it's changed to Belshazzar, which means protect the king, which would be his new job if he did it. Hananiah meant Lord of the Gracious. Then it changed to Shadrach, which means command of Aku, who was a god. Mishael meant who is like the Lord, to Meshach, which means who is what Aku is. Azariah meant the Lord is my helper, and they changed it to Abednego, servant of Nego, also a god. Okay. Someone read 8 through 10.
Give me a level, I don't know what it
No, I told you for scared.
Daniel determined that he would not defile himself with the king's food with the wine he drank. So he asked permission from the chef, something, not to defile himself. God had granted Daniel kindness and compassion for the chef,
Chief eunuch.
Yet he said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and drink. What if he sees your face is looking thinner than the other young men for your age? You would endanger my life with the king.
Okay, so out of, let's say, 75 men, girls, only 4 of them would not eat the king's food, which was probably pretty good. It would have been meat, again, things that Jewish people would not eat. So what's interesting in learning this is that they were okay with getting the education because regardless, they're going to apply God's law to that education. Learning a language doesn't affect their faith, but eating the food would have been defiling themselves. It would have been completely against God's law for them. So they didn't want to. And so they would eat vegetables and water. And not vegetables like we have today. It sounded gross. So the chief eunuch, which would have been kind of the head guy, said, okay, I'll let you do this because God's will. But if you start to look really gaunt, you lose weight, you're not like up here with the good looking guys eating the meat, then we're gonna have to stop because the king will have my head. So, interesting, he allowed Daniel and the other 3 to do this because they absolutely would not go against God. All right, someone 11 through 16.
So Daniel said to the guard, whom the chief eunuch had assigned to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and
Azariah.
Please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then examine our appearance and the appearance of the young men who are eating the king's food, and deal with your servants based on what you see. He agreed with them about this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked better and healthier than all the young men who were eating the king's food. So the guard continued to remove their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables.
So more than likely, the guard is getting more than his share of the king's food. So God sees these men, they're being extremely faithful by not eating the food. So he rewards them by keeping them safe and making them be even healthier than the guys eating the king's food. Because they were committed to the word of God and their hearts could not be changed. They'd never adopt the lifestyle of the Chaldeans, which would have been the most corrupting element. So they're guarding their hearts. Okay, and then this was interesting to me. There's a sequence of characteristics of an uncompromising person. What's uncompromising mean? What?
Someone who does not, turn away.
So they were uncompromising by not eating the food. So the first, unashamed boldness. We don't establish there's a spiritual issue. So most of the time, we don't establish there's a spiritual issue. So if there's something going on, we kind of hem and haw around it saying, it's probably okay, it's not gonna be that big of a deal. I can go with you and smoke a cigarette or, I don't know, look at stuff on the internet because it's not super bad. It's not, God's not gonna hate this sin. Instead of living an uncompromised life where we draw an absolute line saying absolutely not because of my faith, I will not do these things. Those are the people that God uses. We also, uncommon stand. Daniel and his friends went against the popular easy route. They would not eat the food of the king, and because it went against their beliefs, it would have been so much easier to just do what everyone else was doing. But they didn't demand, they politely asked for nasty food and water when they could have been starved. An unearthly protection. God protected them, the uncompromising person. The eunuch could have had his head chopped off by doing this. So could Daniel and his friends. They could have lost weight, probably got a little acne with the bad diet, but they ended up healthier than the guys eating the king's food. Another characteristic, uncompromising person is unhindered persistence. They did not give in. So this would have been at least 3 years. They didn't tire of doing what was morally right. They watched all the other guys doing the cool thing, eating the good food, and they saw, nothing horrible happened to those guys. They weren't struck by lightning. They didn't get sick, but Daniel and his friends still kept their faith. Unblemished faith. They had no whoops along the way. The unusual test. Every part of being in Babylon was a test for Daniel. He was expected to become a Babylonian. The Babylonians didn't believe in our God. They believed in a lot of gods. So they didn't have respect for God, and they obviously didn't obey his rules. So Daniel could have gotten away with eating the food, doing whatever he wanted. But sin brings about doubt, and purity brings confidence. God will honor your faith. Faith is proven when it's tested. And then the unmeasurable blessing. Daniel and his friends became stronger. God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. Okay, here's some verses that kind of go with this. Mark 8, 38. Caleb.
For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in with the glory of his Father and the holy angels.
Word. 1 Peter, Joshua.
That's good.
Annalise.
But if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in having that name.
The word. Caleb.
Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? For what fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of the living God.
Okay, one of the questions, is it possible for Christians to thrive in our world today, considering how our culture hates God?
Yes.
Yes, there will be some difficulties.
Absolutely.
There's a wilderness.
Is it easy or hard to live as a Christian in our current culture?
Depends on how you view it. Some people it's easy because of the friends that are around or the way that they have an outlook on life. Some people it's hard with friends and their outlook.
That's a good point about your friends. Your friends matter. So if you're hanging great things, do you think who's gonna change?
You are.
So you kind of become who you hang out with. So if you're hanging out with sinners a lot, that's probably where you're headed. Daniel was put in an extremely stressful situation. He was among a large group of his peers who almost all gave into sin, kind of like being at school. When we read about Daniel, is there any hesitation in knowing he was a Christian?
You should actually technically use a Jew.
Go Wiley.
Wow.
Go fact check.
Okay, so something to ask about yourself. Okay, in your school, where you hang out with a lot of people, girls, seriously, do people know by looking at you, who you hang out with, how you act, do they know that you're a Christian?
Probably not.
Probably not.
That could be sad. As Christians, we are called to look, act, and be different. So if every now and again, we're kind of like, cussing a little bit, that's okay, our friends do it, I feel cool doing it, makes you fit in. Maybe making fun of somebody, not that bad, but still a sin. Smoking, things like that. Is your social media, if I scroll through your social media, if Jesus scrolled through your social media, would he say, this is the child of because it matters. Are your friends leading you to light or darkness? If you take your stand against sin and evil, God will honor it. I think it's funny. We come here for a little bit, we have fun, and it's quick, and then we go back to our lives. We go back to doing everyday things, the things probably most of your friends are doing. But in the end, we're not given tomorrow. So if tomorrow is our last day, do you know where you're going? Because we can say, I'm a Christian, but does that get you instantly into heaven?
No.
For eternity?
No.
No. It's a big deal.
You gotta do right to get right.
Word. Okay, we're doing small groups quickly. If you are a junior high boy,
Please repeat ourselves.
you're a junior high boy, if you're going